fellow carbon-based bipeds. I am Scott Rose, and you are watching Explosions and Stuff. Today, I'll be reviewing the 2015 film Hood, starring Matt Singletary, Curly Johnson, Darren Jones, and Salvatore Covello. But first, a word from our sponsors. An overview of the movie. RJ returns to his home in inner city Chicago after serving in Afghanistan for 8 years. He sees that his neighborhood is just as bad as when he left it, and it reminds him of the battle-torn villages of the war zone he just left. No longer able to stand it, he takes up arms and starts fighting back against the gangs, even bringing in some of his friends from the army. Now he is fighting a whole new war, only this time it's in his backyard. The pros of this movie? Well, first of all, this movie is a great retelling of the whole Robin Hood legend. I'll be honest, I was worried. I'm a huge fan of Robin Hood. I love the story, I love the legend. So when I saw this, that it was a modernized retelling of Robin Hood, I was worried. Because a lot of times when they take an old story and an old legend like that, like Robin Hood, and they try to bring it into modern times and they try to modernize it and do something like this with it, they just butcher it, they do it horribly, or it's just nothing but a blatant cash grab or something like that. I was really worried going in, but I have to say I was worried for nothing. They nailed the feel. They nailed the spirit of Robin Hood. It was just fantastic. They did it beautifully. It was just glorious. They nailed the whole Robin Hood. This was absolutely the best modernized retelling of a legend I have ever seen in my life. They just nailed this one. They blew it out of the water. I can't say enough about how well they just got the spirit and the soul of the Robin Hood legend into this movie. They did it beautifully. And kind of tying in with that, the story in this movie, you care about all of the characters in this movie. You care about them in some way, shape, or form. You have some sort of emotional feeling towards every character in this movie. Whether you love them, you're worried about them, you're concerned because they're in the hospital, or you hate them because they're the bad guy and you want them to get what's coming to them. You care about every character in this movie on some emotional level. They nailed it. They did it beautifully. I absolutely not fell in love, but I loved every character in this movie as a character. I loved that I felt some sort of emotion towards every single character in this movie. That's something that rarely happens to me, in my opinion. I rarely have like a strong emotional feeling towards every character in the movie. Tying in with all of that, and pretty much every pro that I've said about this movie can be narrowed down really to this one point, and that it was beautifully written. I loved how this movie was written. I normally don't call out people by name or just, single out an individual. But I gotta say, and I'm gonna apologize in advance if I butchered the pronunciation of your name. I am sorry. But Michael Lansnew did a beautiful job of just writing this. He wrote the movie, he also directed the movie, and he just blew it out of the water. The writing, the dialogue, the scenes, everything in this movie was just written beautifully, and I absolutely loved it. The cons of this movie? Well, the most obvious con of this movie is that it clearly was limited by the budget that it had. I mean, let's be honest. There was once the opening scene of the movie is RJ with his army crew, his army friends, his unit and all that. They're in Afghanistan and they're locked in these cages in the desert. Well, the cages, which are supposed to be metal, are clearly just painted PVC, and the desert is, while it's supposed to be sand, it's clearly just a massive pile of pea gravel. It doesn't look like Afghanistan at all. It looks like some place that just makes and stores and distributes pea gravel. yeah, I mean, this movie is very much limited by its budget. You can tell just by watching this stuff. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It had its budget. It did the best it could with what it had, but it was clearly limited by its budget. And if it just had a bigger budget, they could have done so much more with it. Also, I felt some of the acting in this movie was stiff. Now the leads were fantastic. Everyone who was in a lead role did a great job, but it was the supporting role people who were really stiff. And I mean, I get it. Again, limited by the budget. I mean, you can't, you only have so much money to work with. They did a great job with the leads, but a lot of the supporting actors were really stiff. And I'd be surprised if some of them even had any acting experience before this. That's just the way it is. Really, the one thing that really isn't directed towards the budget or couldn't be fixed by budget is I felt it was a little unclear who the main villain of this movie was. I mean, yeah, you've got the one guy that they show all the time, but he really seems like more of a second in command. You don't really find out who the villain is towards the end. I mean, since I'm familiar with Robin Hood, I knew exactly who the villain was as soon as I saw him, and as soon as they said what his name was, I knew that. I mean, it's, the guy called John. I mean, it's Robin Hood. Prince John is the main villain, and you got this guy who's in political office, and his name is John. He's the bad guy. You know that just by being familiar with Robin Hood. But if someone watched this and they weren't familiar with Robin Hood, they wouldn't really understand who the villain was, like the main villain was. Really, they just, in my opinion, they didn't spend enough time developing the villain of this movie. And they really could have dedicated some more time just to his character development, so it would have been a little more clear who the villain of the movie was. My overall thoughts on the movie? I went into this movie really wanting to enjoy it, and I did, so I give it one thumb up. Now, it's not perfect, but almost all of its flaws were because of budget limitations. That being said, this movie was clearly made with a lot of love, and they did the best they could with what they had. As a fan of the Robin Hood legend, I was worried about how modernizing it would be handled, but they did a fantastic job. If you can get past the budget limitations, then you should really watch Hood. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like it and subscribe to my channel for new action movie reviews posted every week and top 10 lists posted on the 10th of every month. Also, if you have any recommendations for things you would like me to cover in the future, please leave them in the comments below and follow us on Twitter at explosions_TV. Thank you and have a nice day.